Tonight, it all comes down to this from our Decision 2010 headquarters in New York. Election night has arrived. Americans going to the polls to cast their votes, and they have the power to alter the political landscape. Our team has it all covered tonight. Nightly News begins now.
From NBC News election headquarters in New York, this is a special edition of NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
And good evening from Studio 8G here inside 30 Rockefeller Plaza, our Decision 2010 election headquarters. Tonight, with control of Congress at stake and perhaps much more, American voters in all 50 states in a massive midterm election have the chance to alter the American political landscape. The pollsters have been telling us, and there's every indication voters are about to give the political pendulum in this country a good shove. Our team is in place here in the studio and covering races, of course, all across this country. We want to kick it off tonight with our White House correspondent, Savannah Guthrie, on this decision day, which has finally, at long last, arrived. Savannah.
Brian, good evening. It's all over but the voting. With the backdrop of a struggling economy and history, the president's party almost always loses seats in a midterm. Republicans appear to be on the brink of big gains.
Remember to vote on both sides.
Across the country today, after a long, bruising campaign, voters finally had their say.
We need changes, major changes.
There's too many people out of jobs.
I think it's going to be a close race, and that's why I'm here.
Good to see you.
The candidates were out, too, getting some last-minute FaceTime.
I'm Christine O'Donnell. Can I ask for your vote this morning?
And casting their votes. The vice president visited his polling place today, as did the man who would likely take power if Republicans win the House, Ohio Congressman John Boehner.
I think we have a real opportunity to win the majority, and hopefully my colleagues will elect me Speaker.
But the current House Speaker says not so fast.
This afternoon, we're very confident in our candidates and the message that they are delivering.
Can you hear us now? At the Capitol, Tea Party activists were preparing to celebrate their arrival as a force in American politics. While at the White House, the president took to the airwaves, doing a round of radio interviews in some of the campaign's hardest-fought territory, including his own home state of Illinois.
How well I'm able to move my agenda forward over the next couple of years is going to depend in part on folks back home having my back.
For the president, it's a potentially crushing come-down on election night just 2 years ago.
In this election, at this defining moment, change has come to America.
Well, tomorrow we will hear from the president. He has scheduled a news conference for tomorrow afternoon at the White House, Brian.
By the way, he looks like a much younger man just 2 years ago in that videotape. Savannah, who will be here with us all night, thanks. And all night long, it's going to be about two numbers, 39 and 10. The Republicans need 39 House seats to take control, 10 in the Senate. Our political director, Chuck Todd, is with us tonight from his By the Numbers studio, where we'll be talking to him all evening long with a look at these numbers unfolding. Chuck, good evening.
Well, good evening, Brian. And look, I'm going to focus on how to track that House number 39, the magic number. You heard John Boehner basically predicting that they're going to do this. Well, let's start with how to follow this in about 20 minutes, which is the polls that close completely at 7 p.m. We know that in Indiana and Kentucky, some places the polls have already closed. We're seeing some vote count in. But there's a good 15 House seats just in these states, Indiana, Kentucky, Virginia, South Carolina, and Georgia, that are going to tell us a lot about the night and how easily or not Republicans can get those 39 seats. I'm watching these races. In Kentucky, it's the 6th district. This is Lexington. This is Ben Chandler. He is a well-known Democrat there, great-grandson of Happy Chandler, the famous baseball commissioner who integrated Major League Baseball. If he is struggling, barely being able to hang on or doesn't hang on, that tells you it could be a big night for Republicans. In Indiana, there are 3 big House races, 2 of which Republicans really believe they have to win to get to that 39 number. The 2nd district in Indiana, though, is one I'm watching because this is a district, Joe Donnelly, the Democrat, this is a district that President Obama narrowly carried when he carried Indiana. And if this is a place that Democrats are not holding on to, that says a lot. And then finally, in Virginia, key race that I'm watching is in suburban Washington, frankly. Jerry Connolly is a fairly new Democratic congressman. This will tell us if Democrats turned out or not. Did they sit on their hands in Northern Virginia? If he is struggling, it may be the case. And if Republicans win this, you're looking at those predictions of 50 and 60 House seats, Brian.
All right, Chuck Todd is going to be following again these sample races until we have real results in and know what kind of night it's going to be. And all night long, we're also going to be listening to the voice of the voters, what they are telling the exit polls as they vote today and tonight. My colleague Lester Holt is keeping an eye on all of that tonight. Lester, good evening.
Brian, good evening. The data are coming, and a lot of interesting nuggets we're going to be pulling out throughout the evening, but none more defining of what this election is all about than the numbers in the economy. Listen to this, Brian. Almost 9 out of 10 say the economy is not in a good shape, and they are pessimistic. About the same number are worried about the future, and for good reason, because it hits close to home for a lot of people in a personal way. 29% have had a job layoff in the family. 42% say their finances are worse than they were last time, the last time they went to the polls 2 years ago. All that translating into anger. We've been hearing about it throughout the campaign, and boy, they are mad. Today, 26% of voters said they're angry at the government. Nearly half are dissatisfied. Less than a quarter told us they're satisfied or enthusiastic. So when you consider all the negative feelings toward government, it's probably not a big surprise that a solid majority think the government is actually doing too much. 56% say that. 39% want the government to do more. So where is all the anger and unhappiness being channeled? Well, the same number of people said they have an unfavorable view of the Democrats as have an unfavorable view of the Republicans. 53% each. And President Obama is pretty much in the same boat, with 54% of those who went to the voting booth today saying they disapprove of the job he's doing as president. Brian, will be keeping you posted all throughout the evening as we continue to listen to the voice of the voters.
All right, Lester Holt, who appears to be presiding over a city all his own in that studio. Lester, we will be indeed talking to you all night long, and all night we'll be talking with our team here in the studio. That includes the moderator of Meet the Press, David Gregory. David, what are you looking for tonight?
Americans, Brian, are voting their anxiety tonight. 30%, that's an important number. That's the jump in the unemployment rate since President Obama has taken office. People have most of their savings in their home. It's their #1 asset. That's been wiped out in this mortgage crisis. And what Lester just reported, I think, is so important. That view that government is the answer. That's not the view of most Americans. 59% think that government is doing too much. Government has been on trial since President Obama took office, and he's not won the argument that government is part of the solution. That's really what I think is going to be playing out across the country tonight. As Republicans have seized on that, they're raising their hand and saying, we want less government, not more.
And Andrea Mitchell also here with us, of course. Andrea, we get caught up in these congressional races. That hides the fact that so many governor's races are up tonight.
So many, and the states really are the laboratories for a lot of this. 4 out of 5 Americans, 80%, have a chance to vote for their governor today. And if the Republicans only pick up 6 more state houses, they would have 30. That would be their biggest majority of state houses in 16 years. This really changes the battleground for 2012 because there are a lot of big electoral states there. Also, Americans in 36 states can vote for ballot initiatives. In California, that's the chance to vote to regulate and legalize the recreational use of marijuana. The White House opposes that. You can vote in Missouri to regulate puppy mills, and in Oklahoma to make English the official language.
All right, Andrea Mitchell will be watching some, if not all of that tonight. And Mark Whitaker, our Washington bureau chief. Mark, so much said about control of both houses. The U.S. Senate, regardless of control, will be a different-looking body after this election.
Absolutely, and we know what an important role it played in the last 2 years. It's really the sort of temperature control on government. It played that role when the Democrats had a majority. If the Republicans take the majority, I think you're going to expect big initiatives perhaps coming out of the House. But again, the Senate still divided, narrowly controlled by one party or the other. It will still be the brake on the big initiatives coming out of the House.
And over here on my right, Tom Brokaw, who's covered a few of these, and tonight is going to be looking at the mood of America, which hasn't been very sunny lately.
No, but Brian, I think what we have to remember is this is the election of the first moderate insurgency of the Internet age. President Obama obviously used the Internet very skillfully to get elected president. But the Tea Party, which was really not even on the screen about a year ago at this time, is a very domineering force during the course of this election, and I think we'll see the results tonight. Tea Party doesn't want to be a third-party movement. It wants to take over the Republican Party. That means that if the Republicans do well tonight and the Tea Party candidates do well tonight, there are going to be not just 2 fights going on in Washington, but 3 or 4 fights, and that's what we have to keep our eye on.
Oh, we'll have a lot to talk about tonight. Tom, thanks. To all my friends in here, thanks. And along with our team here in the studio, our correspondents, our producers and camera crews covering races all across this country. We want to check in with a few of them, starting with the Nevada Senate race. Can Harry Reid, the Democrats' leader in the Senate, hang on to his job? John Yang covering for us tonight in Las Vegas. John, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. You'd think the end of the campaign would mean the end of the bickering and the gamesmanship. Well, you'd be wrong. Here at this hotel where Harry Reid is having his election night party, the Tea Party Express has booked a room for an election night party. They even want to park the Tea Party Express bus out front. Brian?
All right, John Yang out in Las Vegas, thanks. And a much talked about Senate race in the state of Kentucky, so-called split time zone state, by the way, where some of the polls have actually now closed. Kevin Tibbles in Bowling Green at Rand Paul headquarters. Hey, Kevin, good evening.
Hey, Brian, this has been a highly publicized and nasty campaign, and tonight we find out if the people of Kentucky have thrown their weight behind Tea Party candidate Rand Paul or the Democrat State Attorney General Jack Conway. There have been fireworks when Conway questioned Paul's religion in an attack ad. Paul refused to shake his hand, and when a detractor approached Paul at a rally, his supporters wrestled her to the ground. Still, the polls had Paul ahead coming into today. The voting ends early here, so stay tuned. Kentucky might have an early announcement, Brian.
I'll be talking to you along the way, Kevin. Thanks. Way up to the north and west we go. A big 3-way race in Alaska for Senate. Our own Kristen Welker covering in Anchorage. Kristen, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. Parts of Alaska got their first snowfall this election day as candidates made their final push for the Senate. The Democrat in this race, Scott McAdams, once written off, is now showing signs of life. And there are 2 Republicans, Tea Party favorite Joe Miller and write-in candidate Lisa Murkowski. Polls here close at 8 p.m. Alaska time. Brian?
It could be a long one up there in Alaska. Kristen, thanks. Study and contrast down to Florida we go, although another 3-way race. A lot at stake there tonight. Ron Mott is in Coral Gables. Ron, good evening.
Hey, Brian, good evening. There was a lot of chatter in this race about making it a 2-way race, but that did not happen. This race will officially end in a little over an hour with all 3 candidates. And, of course, the folks gathering here at the famed Biltmore Hotel hope it's their guy, the Tea Party-backed Republican Marco Rubio, who will be the last man standing. He's had some pretty good leads in the polls coming into Election Day over Governor Charlie Crist and the Democratic Congressman Kendrick Meek. They're ready to party here. The countdown to the vote count is well underway, Brian.
All right, Ron, thanks. Back up north to Delaware. Big Senate race in a small state that has received an inordinate amount of attention because of one of the candidates, Janet Shamlian in Wilmington tonight. Hey, Janet, good evening.
Hi, Brian. It's been a bitter battle here in Delaware. Christine O'Donnell, though, it's made her one of the biggest names of the midterms, despite the fact that she's trailing in the pre-election day polls. Today, both she and Democrat Chris Coons visited a number of polling places across the state, something you can do in a day in Delaware to get out their voters. Tonight, she'll be right here for what she says will be a celebration. But most political observers believe this Senate seat will stay firmly in Democratic hands.
All right,
Brian?
Janet, that'll be an interesting place to be. Another race we're watching closely, Senate race, Pennsylvania. Ron Allen in Philadelphia tonight. Ron?
Good evening to you, Brian. Yes, Pat Toomey lost his bid for this seat 6 years ago. He's a Tea Party candidate without the drama, you might say, and he believes that his time has finally arrived. On the Democratic side, Joe Sestak has narrowed the pre-election polls in the closing days with a lot of help from the President and First Lady. But Republicans across this deep blue state expect to send the Obama administration a very loud message tonight. They expect to win a Senate seat, the governorship, and a few House races as well. Brian?
Right, Ron Allen in Philly. Now we go to Illinois. A lot of people have nominated this for the nastiest race in the country, the U.S. Senate seat, once held by President Barack Obama, now up for grabs. Carol Marine of our NBC station WMAQ in Chicago once again for us tonight. Carol?
Brian, polls close here in an hour and 15 minutes. I just got an email from BarackObama.com asking if I can spend 20 minutes calling voters to get out the vote. Sarah Palin has just done robocalls of conservative voters. Rahm Emanuel is tweeting. We don't know how many people, but I got one of those. All because this race conceivably could be so close between Alexei Giannoulias, the Obama candidate, and Congressman Mark Kirk, the Republican. It may go down to the wire, Brian.
Carol, strikes me I don't have your email address. I may be the only one. Carol Marine in Chicago will be talking to you along the way. It may be a long night in the Rockies, a critical and very tight Senate race in Colorado. Tom Costello covering in Denver. Hey, Tom.
Hi, Brian. It's neck and neck here. Democrats say that they've had 3,000 workers out knocking on 300,000 doors over the last 3 days. They're trying to overcome a Republican voter advantage here, registered voter advantage, and they're telling me that it's going to be a late night. Republicans say, no, we'll have this wrapped up early. It's Ken Buck versus Michael Bennet. We'll be watching. Back to you.
Okay, Tom, thanks. And way out west to California. Big Senate race, big governor's race, even as Andrea mentioned, marijuana legalization on the ballot tonight. Lee Cowan live for us tonight in Oakland, the Jerry Brown campaign headquarters. Lee?
Hey, Brian, this could be maybe one of the places that the president gets a little bit of good news tonight, because both the Democratic incumbents here in the big races were leading in pre-election day polls. On the Senate side, you had Barbara Boxer. She had about an 8-point advantage over her Republican challenger, Carly Fiorina. And then in the governor's race, despite spending more of her own money than any other candidate in history, Meg Whitman was still trailing behind the man who's held this job twice before, Jerry Brown. So at least for the Democrats anyway, Brian, they're hoping that California will remain reliably blue.
Lee Cowan in California. Our thanks to all. Just a tiny fraction of the races we'll be covering tonight in prime time and going into late night after your late local news. For now, we'll be back from our election headquarters in a moment with some of the other news of this election day. Back now with more of our Election Day coverage from our Decision 2010 headquarters in New York. And a quick reminder again about tonight. We're on in prime time and then back on again after your late local news. As we've been saying, the view from Capitol Hill could be very different starting around about tomorrow morning. Kelly O'Donnell has the view from there for us tonight. Kelly, good evening.
Hi, Brian. Well, power will start to shift here immediately. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who's kept herself out of the spotlight for weeks, will have to decide if Democrats do lose the House, will she step aside and let another Democrat become the face of the party, or will she try to stay on as minority leader? Republican John Boehner's got to figure out how to manage the anti-establishment Tea Partiers who've railed against the government they could soon join. And if you're wondering, moving boxes are already here, and they're packed for 3 of those temporarily appointed senators whose jobs end when tonight's winners get to town. Brian?
Machinery of government already at work. Kelly O'Donnell on the Hill for us tonight. Thanks. We want to take a quick look at other news in the world today. This week has gotten off to an awful, deadly start in Iraq. Today in Baghdad, at least 13 explosions ripped through mainly Shiite neighborhoods, killing at least 76 people, wounding more than 200 others. There were car bombs, roadside bombs, mortars. Today's violence came 2 days after gunmen attacked a church in Baghdad, leaving another 58 dead. That terrorist plot involving cargo bombs from Yemen just keeps getting more troubling the more they learn. The FBI is now investigating what might have been a dry run and whether al-Qaeda terrorists in Yemen sent packages to the U.S. to see how long it would take. Our Justice correspondent Pete Williams, been covering this, has an update for us tonight. Pete, good evening.
Right, Brian. Intelligence officials say this could have been an attempt to explore the logistics of international shipping. A month and a half ago, in mid-September, suspected al-Qaeda members in Yemen sent 3 packages to Chicago. Nothing hazardous was found. When the boxes were checked en route and allowed to continue, they contained mostly books and papers. Nothing like the computer printers that hid explosives in the 2 packages sent last week. In Europe, police are chasing a separate spate of package bombs, mostly in Greece, where they've made 2 arrests. 2 bombs went off outside the Russian and Swiss embassies. 2 others were found and destroyed at the Athens airport. And in Germany, police disarmed a bomb sent from Greece to the office of Chancellor Angela Merkel. Nobody's been hurt. The police suspect a radical anti-government group, but it's raising more questions about cargo screening. Brian.
All troubling stuff. You're right, Pete. Pete Williams in Washington. Thanks. And just a heads up here tonight, while we're covering election results, Haiti could be dealing with a hurricane by week's end. A very worrisome situation. The storm Tomas is centered about 300 miles south of Haiti. U.S. Navy vessels headed there with additional disaster relief in advance as Haiti continues to deal with more than 1 million homeless earthquake survivors and the continuing spread of cholera there. On Wall Street here in New York today, the Dow Industrials closed ahead, gaining 64 points on this Election Day 2010. And after waiting more than half a century, finally tomorrow, the San Francisco Giants will get a ticker tape parade. In case you missed it last night, this was how Game 5 ended, as the Giants beat the Texas Rangers to win the World Series. The last time a team named the Giants won a World Series was back in '54. Of course, they were the New York Giants back then, before their celebrated move west. When Nightly News continues tonight from our election headquarters, just a few of the millions who voted today telling us what was on their minds. And back here tonight from our Decision 2010 headquarters. Earlier in the broadcast, we saw that the economy is a major factor in a lot of the votes being cast today. We knew that much. For every voter, though, there's a slightly different story, personal reason he or she decided to cast a ballot today. So we wanted to end tonight with a snapshot of just a few of them from around our country. Our report tonight from NBC's Rahema Ellis.
In Miami, Arlona Davis was in step with about 25 million Americans who voted early.
I am a retired real estate professional.
This loyal Democrat, concerned about affordable health care and jobs, says she's fed up with bitter party politics.
I would like to see Republicans and Democrats working together for the good of the country. All of this bickering and mean-spirited attitude, I don't like it. Left, right, left.
For some other voters today, it wasn't a question of left or right.
That's who we're voting for Congress. I am a single mother with 2 children.
In Rock Hill, South Carolina, 41-year-old Sheila Huckabee says education tops her list of concerns. As an independent, she voted based on the issues.
Senate, Congress. Locally, I tend to vote for the person who's going to support public education, because that's the business I'm in and I feel passionate about it.
In San Diego, Fred Sotelo has voted the Democratic ticket since he was 18.
My name is Fred Sotelo, and I am a Latino business owner.
But today he voted Republican, concerned about the slumping economy and family members still in Mexico who may want to come to America.
We need fair representation that's going to look out for our issues. We can't just vote one way all the time if they're not going to be responsive.
And if you're wondering about the youth vote, pivotal in Barack Obama's victory 2 years ago, pundits say with few jobs and climbing student debt, youthful political enthusiasm has faded. But not for James D'Angelo.
I'm a first-year law student from Chicago.
This young Republican campaigned until the last minute.
The immediate job growth opportunities and prospects are very important. I really am afraid of what our economy might look like in the next 2 to 4 years.
4 Americans, each motivated by different issues, casting their votes on Election Day. Rahema Ellis, NBC News, New York.
That does it for this broadcast this Tuesday night. Thank you for being with us from our election headquarters here in New York. And another reminder, back on the air during prime time tonight with our Decision 2010 coverage. Then we come on again after your late local news tonight into late night tonight. I'm Brian Williams for our entire team. Until we see you later on, good night for now from New York.